I'm Jordan Banderas, also known as the Bad Influence. And before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. So let's get into today's episode, shall we? Has this ever happened to you where you make a mistake, yet you keep making it over and over and over and over again? And then you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm such a dumbass. I'm a bad person. I'm a loser. You have all these feelings. And it happens to a lot of people. Sometimes you do it driving while drunk. You get arrested once and yet you keep doing it. It happens with people that do drugs as well. You get in trouble for doing that, but yet you keep doing it. And if you have done it, don't feel bad because I've done it. I have done this pretty much my entire life. So that's why I want to talk about this, because one of the things that I have noticed recently is that instead of owning up to our mistakes, one of the things that we always do as people is that we look at the mistake, we look at the consequences, and we say, meh, it's not my fault. Nobody told me how I could get in trouble if I do this. And we sweep it under the rug. We're like, we sweep it under the rug. And then we keep making the same mistake over and over and over and over again. And that pile of mistakes adds up. And then you trip and then you feel bad. You are like, oh my gosh, why am I like this? Why don't I get that I keep getting in trouble for doing the same thing, or I keep making the same mistake over and over and over again? And then pretty much we just keep repeating this cycle where literally we're just making the same mistake and we don't really learn anything from that. We don't learn anything from it. We literally act like it never happened, but yet it keeps happening. One of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is because a few weeks ago, I made a huge mistake while I was recording the podcast. I was recording this episode and I spent like 30 minutes recording it, okay? I set up the equipment, I set up everything, but I noticed that one of the cables was loose. Instead of making sure that it was tight or anything like that, I was like, you know what? Meh, it's going to work. Like, whatever. And I just keep doing my thing. I recorded it. And usually what I do after I'm done recording the episodes, I listen to the recording to make sure what I can improve, what I can do better, how I can pronounce certain words better. And here's what happened. This is what pissed me off so bad. Because within 5 minutes of the recording, the audio went out. And I freaked out. I was like, what the fuck? What happened? And then I started looking at the cables. The cable that was loose actually came undone. It got unplugged. And that's the audio cable that connects the camera to the audio interface. So I was mad. I was beyond frustrated. I was like, feeling so sick to my stomach that I was literally ready to explode. I was like, how could I make this mistake when I should have known better? Like, I felt bad. And I also felt disgusted because I was like, I should have checked it. I should make sure that it was working. I should have done all these things, but I didn't. It was my fault. And I knew it was my fault. But here's the thing. Instead of taking responsibility for it and saying, like, you know what, I have to own up to it, I tried to blame it on anybody else but me. I tried to blame it on my wife, my dogs, the universe, you name it. Pretty much I was saying, like, it's not my fault, nobody helped me, and everything like that, you know? But then I realized that in the end, nobody else touched the cables. My wife was asleep, so I set up everything by myself. The dogs are scared of the equipment, so they were not even in the room with me or anything like that. So I had to understand that this mistake was 100% my fault. It wasn't nobody else's fault. And I had to own up to it, which is fucking hard because it's literally like punching yourself in the stomach. And it hurts not physically, but it hurts your ego. So it hurts emotionally. And your ego takes a punch and you're like, oh, like that's where it hurts the most because you're like, oh, my ego. You start to hurt emotionally and then you start to feel bad and then you have this little voice in your head that tells you, oh, you suck, you do all of these things because you made a mistake. But here's the problem with this. If you let that voice take over, it's the worst thing that you can do because you're going to feel so bad about yourself that you're going to stop doing what you're trying to do. But here's where I learned from making this fucking mistake. I still feel mad about that. So after owning up to this, I started thinking, how do people deal with their mistakes nowadays? What do they do to learn from their mistakes so they don't make it again? So they don't actually do the same things that I used to do back before I got married. And if you're thinking, how come you mess up so much before you got married? And that's because I had no fucking guidance in my life. There were no role models. So because of that, I thought that nothing was my fault. Like there was nobody to guide me, to tell me what I was doing wrong or anything like that. So in reality, the way that I lied to myself was telling myself that everything that I was doing, it was somebody else's fault because nobody told me what I was doing right or wrong. And I kept doing that until I got married. But anyway, so in order for me to understand how people are dealing with their mistakes or exactly what they're doing to learn from them, I went online, like I always do. I checked social media. There's a few groups that I follow where I was able to ask this question: what you guys do when you guys make a mistake? Same thing on Reddit. There's groups. There's everything on the internet pretty much. And I even talked to some of my friends. I talked to my wife. And what I found is not pretty at all. I was surprised because the amount of people that blame others for their mistakes and don't own up to them is pretty staggering. I was like, whoa, I'm not the only one, which is great. But at the same time, it's like, whoa, no wonder why we always get in trouble and not take responsibility because there's just so many people that do this. Like, I was reading some of the responses to this question that I made, that I posted on social media, and there were a lot that said like, well, it's not my fault. Nobody told me that I was doing it wrong. Kind of like what the way that I was living my life. Like, people were saying the same exact thing. Like, oh, it wasn't my fault. If I cheated on my wife, it wasn't my fault because nobody told me that I couldn't cheat. If I got fat or something like that, if I had a heart attack, nobody told me that by having a bad diet, it will give me a heart attack. That's one of the responses that I got. And I was so fucking surprised because I was like, whoa. So in reality, all of these answers that I got pretty much tells me that it doesn't matter what the mistake is. For some reason, people believe that it's always someone else's fault. Which, I mean, now that I see life from a different perspective, that's not going to help you at all if you always think that way. Because after I realized that so many people were passing the blame onto others for their mistakes, I was like, holy shit. I used to do this a lot. And I almost did when I made the mistake with the podcast. So I was like, I need to change this. I was like, not anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. Because I almost blame my wife, like I said, and my dogs and the universe. So I was like, I need to change. I need to make sure that I learn from this. I don't want to be like the rest. I don't want to pass blame onto others when it's my own fault. So I had to come up with a way to make myself learn from my mistakes so I don't repeat them. Because I've been arrested before, I've been doing so much shit, and I have talked about this on the podcast, and I always blame everybody else. So I was like, you know what? I need to change. I need to be better. I need to become a better person and learn from those mistakes so I can actually grow. And one of the things that I did, because I didn't have the answer right away, I didn't. So I pondered for like a week until it was time to record my next episode. And while I was setting up the equipment again, when I was about to plug in the cord that caused all the issues, I started to feel disgusted. And I plugged the cable, and I still had that feeling of disgust. So I was like, oh my gosh, this feeling is so strong. Why do I feel like this? But something kept telling me in my head that I had to double check the cable. So I did, and it was okay. I did a sound check to make sure that everything was working, and it worked. So I was like, oh my gosh, I think I figured out a way that will work for me. And I want to share that with you, because one of the things that I learned from this experience is that if you add a strong feeling to the mistake, most likely you're not going to repeat it. Like in my case, I added this feeling of disgust. And when I was doing the same thing that caused the mistake, I felt that disgust creeping on me, and I was like, I need to make sure that I don't feel like this anymore, because it's a bad feeling. I was like, ew, I don't want to feel like that again. I don't want to make the same mistake. So I had to double check the cable, make sure that everything was working, and it was great. It was fine and dandy. It was fine and dandy. So for me, this particular feeling of disgust worked. And it can work for you. Now, you can use any other type of feeling. You can use anger, you can use happiness, you can use whatever type of feeling you want. But you also have to understand this. Whenever you try something the first time, you're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. But in order for you to avoid those mistakes, if you put that strong feeling, wherever it is, like for me it's disgust, behind that action that caused the mistake, anytime you're doing that, that feeling is going to creep up on you, and it's going to remind you, hey, you feel disgusted or you feel like this when you make this mistake. So it's almost like pouring cold water on your face and waking you up and be more aware and making you more aware of what's happening in whatever you're doing. So that's one of the things that helped me in this case. And that's why I wanted to share with you, because it could work for you as well. Now, I've been using this particular option or this particular technique for a while. It's been a few weeks, and it has worked wonders. I even was telling my wife about this, because she does the same thing. When she makes a mistake, she feels mad, and then she repeats it, so she feels bad about herself. And I was like, you know what? Why don't you add a feeling towards that action that caused the mistake? And I was telling her about the disgust and everything, and she asked me, like, why does it have to be disgust? And this is what I answered to her, because that was a good question. And I'm sure you have a similar question as well. So the way that I explained it to my wife is that, imagine you're driving home from work, okay? You're going home, you're driving, just doing your own thing, something, listening to music, singing along, checking your text, which you're not supposed to do, but I've seen people do it. I don't do that anymore because I've learned from my mistakes. I don't want to cause a crash. So you're doing something, right? Now, right before you get to your street where your home is located, there's this big ass pothole, and I mean big. You know what I'm talking about? Like the tax dollars are not able to cover that shit. It's a big ass pothole that if you hit it, you're either gonna pop your tire or you're gonna damage the suspension on your car. But because we're distracted, we hit it all the time. And then you feel bad because you know that popping the tire is actually going to cost you money. Fucking up the suspension is going to cost you money. So you feel bad about it. Now imagine putting a feeling like disgust behind that. So anytime you're on that street, you know that pothole is there. Even though you're distracted or anything like that, you still know that pothole is going to be there and you're going to hit because you're distracted. So what that feeling is going to do is that it's going to start creeping up on you, and then it's going to make you aware and understand that that pothole is there. And what you're going to do, because you don't want to feel disgusted, you don't want to feel whatever you decide to feel, you're like, you know what? I don't want to feel like this anymore. So you actually drive around it. You miss it. You avoid it. You actually don't damage your car. So that makes you feel good in the end, because you're like, you know what? I learned my lesson. I'm not making the same mistake. And that's exactly how I explained it to my wife. And my wife was like, oh my gosh, that makes more sense now. So that's pretty much what this feeling of disgust has done for me. Because when you add that extra punch or extra feeling, you're going to become more aware of what's happening in your surroundings. And when you avoid, or when you understand why you're making that mistake and you learn from it, you're not going to make it again. You're going to be able to keep going. You're going to learn something new, and then you're going to be able to reach your goal, which is important for you, right? So that's why I wanted to talk about this. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you guys is because after getting all these answers from social media about why and how people blame others for their mistakes, I feel, or actually I believe, that we should be the example for others. We should be owning up to our mistakes and say, you know what? This is my fuck up. This is my mistake. I messed up. So I need to do something about this. Because when people start seeing that, and they see that we're making progress in our lives, that we're changing our lives, that we're growing, that we're actually becoming successful from learning from our mistakes, then they're going to ask us, how did you do it? How did you get there? I want to have that life that you have. Tell me how you did it. And the best part about this, when somebody asks you that particular question, is that you're going to be so damn proud about yourself that you're going to be saying to them, I got to this point in my life by learning from my mistakes, by not repeating them ever again, by saying, fuck this. This is a mistake I make. What can I learn from this? What's the lesson behind the mistake? And then move on to better and bigger things. And I can guarantee you that when you say something like that, people will not know what to say. They will be like, what? Owning up to my mistake? What is that? The only reason why I say that is because I had this reaction recently when somebody asked me about making a mistake, because I was talking to one of my friends and I told him about, everything that I just shared on the podcast, and he asked me like, why would you do that? Like, why would you feel bad about yourself for making a mistake? So I explained the same thing, and he was literally flabbergasted. He didn't know what to say. He was like, and I'm like, I know, right? It's bad for you if you don't learn from your mistake, but it's good for others when they learn from their mistake, and then they can actually help other people that are going through the same thing. It's like, you know what? I learned from my mistake. I know how it feels to make this particular mistake, so this is how I avoided it. This is what I learned from it, and then you cannot help others become better as well. So that's what I wanted to share on today's episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the growth. Thank you for the feedback. Remember to share, like, and subscribe. We are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The link is in the episode's description. And here are my final thoughts. Don't be like the rest. Learn from your mistakes so you can move forward while everyone else keeps making the same mistake repeatedly and staying back and holding themselves back. And have a great day.